So this is the shoulder snap t-shirt, and I'm really looking at showing you today how we put the binding around the neckline. It's really simple, easy. So we're going to be starting at step 8 in the pattern, attach the binding. I have already prepared both my shoulder seams, and I have this seam pressed to the back. I'm going to take my binding, and with the right side facing the right side of my t-shirt, I'm going to be stitching this around my neckline, slightly stretching my binding, but I'm not stretching the t-shirt. So let's take it to the machine and start stitching. I'm going to be placing my binding about 1 inch or so over the top. I'm going to slide it under my serger, which is what I'm using in my case, and then I'm just going to start stitching, and I'm going to be slightly pulling my binding while I stitch, remembering right sides are together. Now, as I'm approaching the end, once again I'm going to keep going and leave a nice long overhang. I've cut mine significantly longer than needed, and that's fine, my binding. So now that the binding is stitched on, I'm going to be taking it over to the sewing machine. So you can see now that I've attached the binding to the t-shirt. What will happen next is, with the seam allowance facing up towards the binding, we fold the binding over that seam allowance. We then flip it over, we pop it under the machine. We have our machine set to a zigzag stitch, and we're just going to start zigzagging the binding on. Before we start stitching, it's important that your sewing machine is set up correctly. And what this means is you need to have your pressure reduced off your presser foot. Refer to your user manual to find out exactly how you do this. And also, you need to have your stitch set to a zigzag stitch. Okay, so I've spoken before about the presser foot, and that when we're sewing with knits we want to reduce all the pressure off the pressure foot. So on my machine, I'll show you where it's located, and your machine you'll need to look at your user manual. So I just need to open up the window, and here is my presser foot pressure, and I will actually dial mine up to 1, which means it's got all the pressure off it. The reason we do this is because it helps to prevent our fabric from becoming wavy as we sew it. I like to take it nice and slow to get a lovely even stitch. We stop, we readjust, and we keep going. You'll notice while I'm stitching, I'm lightly holding my presser foot up. This will also help to reduce that pressure. It stops the fabric from going all wavy. So I am approaching the end now. Okay, so I've finished sewing the whole way along, and I've continued my stitching for 1 inch after. The rest of it I'm just going to cut off. Because from here, I'm going to flip it over, pull back this, and I'm going to do a little stitch along here, which will hold it down, and then I'm going to snip it straight after. Okay, so with it folded back, I've got my machine actually set to a straight stitch now. I'm just going to pop it under. It's a good idea to make sure you hold your tails, your thread tails, when you start stitching. And we're just going to stitch forward and reversing, and forward and reversing, and then lift it off, pull it off. Now I'm going to cut my tail nice and close to where I've stitched, and obviously get rid of all my stringy bits. So now we have a lovely clean finish for our binding.